You're watching the Black Wonder channel, where we discuss current events, geopolitics, and much more.
Welcome back, friends. Welcome back to the Corbett Report. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com, here with your weekend flashback video from the Corbett Report archives. And this week, we're going to flash back to 2013 to an edition of Film Literature and the New World Order on Gaslight, the film Gaslight, a 1940 British psychological thriller. An interesting movie, at any rate. I hope you have seen it. If not, here is a discussion of it from 2013, and one that is obviously relevant to the age in which we're living, in which gaslighting has become a term that has become common in everyday parlance. Specifically, it was, I think, introduced into the public imagination, or reintroduced to the public imagination, in the Trump era. But here is a pre-Trump 2013 discussion that I had with Thomas Sheridan about this subject, and about how it aptly describes the process by which conspiracy realists are told you're crazy for pointing out the obvious observable reality. So I think a discussion that is highly relevant to what is happening today.
Well, what makes that film so powerful is the fact that it happens in these pernicious tiptoe steps. The woman has no idea what's happening, because the psychopath that's the agenda in the story, without giving the plot away, is after a very big long-term goal that has been 20 years in the making, essentially. And he is planning this, so far in advance and so complex, and everything is perniciously done. You see, psychopaths do not have creativity. What they have is deviousness. They're phenomenal at deviousness, but they don't have creativity. And their creativity that they would have would be simply deviousness. It would not be born out of any kind of creative intention. It would be purely pathological. And it's the ultimate game of cat and mouse, where the target is the mouse. Well, it's the target's psyche that's actually the mouse, that's being played with by the cat, and the cat would be, in a metaphorical sense, the pathological drive of the psychopath towards an agenda. 9 times out of 10, a psychopath will do it for real accomplishments, things they want to do. In other cases, they will often do it just for a laugh. The film is not only a well-told and well-acted story, I think it's a masterpiece of film noir, British 1940s film noir. You see, if people watch this film, I hope they will spend time to actually look at how it's lit. It's very telling. Whenever the woman in question is about to be gaslighted, there's very intense, strong shadows projected on the wall behind her through the studio lighting. This is to indicate, it may be on a Jungian term, it may be actually archetypal, or could even be synchronistic, but this is a very telling aspect of why she's being gaslighted. She is not dealing with her shadow. I'm talking about the shadow in the Jungian sense. She has obviously issues in her life which she has not worked on, which has allowed the psychopath to get in there. In her case, she's probably too dependent. Again, I don't want to give too much of the story away. We live in an age, thanks to Big Brother, Facebook, and all this other social media, and all this other people putting their heart out on TV shows like Jerry Springer, Oprah, and even these X Factor shows, that people are too quick to pour their personalities out there. There's no self-restraint. Psychopaths in the media have deliberately done this because they want to know what makes society as a whole tick, just like what makes an individual who's about to be targeted by a psychopath tick. So the first thing is to be very guarded of your own behavior. Do not wear your heart on your sleeve. Do not go on the social networks and talk about your insecurities and failings. You will only be setting off little target signs for these psychopaths to move in on. Only develop intense understandings of people you've known for a very long time.
In similar manners, let's talk about the societal application of the gaslight effect to really control the populace in a type of societal mind control.
Well, I'll give you a classic one that happened recently. Now, people are probably sick of hearing about it, but we've got to listen to it and pay attention to it. The recent Miley Cyrus performance at the Video Music Awards was a classic example of gaslighting. What we were basically given was a kind of a sort of a mind rape of psychosexual insanity with strong pedophilic aspects, put to the point where we have what Miley Cyrus on stage basically being, doing a doggy style with some no-talent singer dressed in a stripy outfit. These people should have switched off their TVs and not sat down with their kids and watched the Video Music Awards 10 years ago. But they're still there, and I guarantee you the ones who were disgusted by the Miley Cyrus fiasco will be watching it again next year because they've been gaslighted to expect that somehow it's not going to happen one year, that all their complaints mean something. And this is exactly what voting is as well. Voting is the same thing. We vote for either the make-believe left-wing party or the make-believe right-wing party. And what we get is the same globalist agenda. And then people every 4 years saying, what the hell did we vote for? They backtracked completely on what they said they were going to do. And yet the populace will go to the voting booths and they will vote again in the next general election or the next presidential election or the next council elections. We are so gaslighted as a society. It's almost fantastical. You almost have to admire these creatures for what they've done to us. That as above, so below. One of the great things about waking up is you can sit there and you can watch a movie like Gaslight. You can observe the way it's lit. You can observe the actual the composition of each individual scene within the movie, and see allegories and motifs that scream, this is not only my life or has been my life at some point, but this is a microcosm of our world. The house that she lives in could be seen and viewed as an allegory of the society we live in. Remember, in the movie, she does not go to the upper floors. In the movie, her decency of wanting to help the poor children on the streets by buying them toys or sweets is exploited upon as weakness. In the movie, public ridicule of her behavior is used to keep her locked indoors and locked away. Just like we're locked in our houses, we don't communicate with our neighbors. Where charity is something we give to people like Bob Geldof so he can get into space for free, thanks to Richard Branson. It's not going down the street and helping the local neighbors. We have to deal with the shadow.
Absolutely right, and you bring out a very important point of that movie, and one of the most uncomfortable points for me is when he does take her out finally. She's been trying to get out of the house all this time, and he finally does take her out for an evening of entertainment, and so of course he decides to manipulate her at that point and to cause her to have a breakdown there in public that obviously he can use against her later on as he's setting up his alibi of her mental illness. So absolutely, this is something that happens, unfortunately, every single day to all of us who do play into this. And I want to give an example that I think is particularly horrific in this regard, talking about Karl Rove. And Ron Suskind wrote back in 2004 about a conversation that he had with Karl Rove, of course, George W. Bush is one of his political advisors. And writing about Rove, he said, quote, "The aide, i.e. Rove, said that guys like me were in what we call the reality-based community, which he defined as people who believe that solutions emerge from your judicious study of discernible reality. I nodded and murmured something about Enlightenment principles and empiricism. He cut me off. That's not the way the world really works anymore. He continued, we're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality, judiciously as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities which you can study too, and that's how things will sort out."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's it. That's gaslighting 101 in the political sense. But people, again, do not want to believe it. They do not want to accept it. Even when they tell us their intentions. You look at when people go on about George Bush too, when that famous quote where he said about the US Constitution, he says, "Someone get that damn piece of paper out of my face," right? And Americans were so horrified by that. Guess what, folks? He was telling the truth. Had been shocked by George Bush's words and being offended by them, come to accept that he actually meant them. And in his own funny way, we were getting a reveal, and he was telling us the truth.
The terrorists hate you for your freedom is absolutely true. It's just a question of who the terrorists are. And unfortunately, I think we're all too familiar with who the terrorists really are in this day and age. But there you go. It's another one of those truths hiding in plain sight. Well, the genesis for this conversation today is actually something that you mentioned in our conversation last time, a couple of years ago now. So digging way back, I remember you mentioning specifically talking about gaslighting in terms of art and the way that art modern art and the sort of twisted nature of the aesthetics that are increasingly being held up as and venerated is in effect a way of trying to twist our own sensibilities. I was wondering if you could just address that quickly as well before we go.
Well, we spoke last time about this, is that what happens is basically, since I've been a kid and since you've been a kid, and probably when our parents were kids, modern galleries have been filled with what basically are conceptual works that don't relate in any aesthetic form to what we would consider to be beautiful. That's okay. I've no problem with that. I have no problem with art being used to challenge. No problem at all. The thing is that other forms of expression are not being allowed in the galleries. So the galleries are filled with cardboard boxes in the corner of a room, or this kind of nonsense, or a few pebbles in the corner, a pile of garbage in the side of a big gallery space. I saw one recently that, on so many levels it was so deep. It was a video installation in a local art gallery here, a very, very beautiful modern building that was bought with, large amounts of taxpayers' money. And all the installation was what these art colleges produce now, video installations. And it was just a guy's on this, on a TV screen, a large flat screen, just being filmed. And he was saying things like 24, lemon, oranges, and then long pauses. And it was supposed to mean something deep. I went back an hour later and the video installation had broken down. There's a little paper sign on it said, installation has been closed for technical reasons. And it's the absurdity of modern art and what they call modern art was shown in that one scene. The sign saying installation is cancelled due to technical reasons because the monitor broke down, that a DVD player broke down, is precisely as artistic as the ridiculous monitor on the screen with this guy saying nothing. What they're doing is they're changing our perception of reality. In my last book, The Anvil of the Psyche, I talk about them and I call them the merchants of nonsense. And if they're changing our perception of reality, then we have to say to ourselves, to what means? Well, I'll tell you what it is. If we go into the art galleries and all we're met with is absurdity and blandness, it's going to make advertising on the billboards on the streets and on TV look very beautiful, very colourful, and very seductive. The same thing with political posters. I've noticed that too as well. Political posters, if you look at them, and you can't just put it down to printing technology. In the last 10 years, they're almost psychedelic in terms of the amount of colours and images they put in them. They hire top graphic designers to create beautiful posters. The same with the magazines. Magazines are crammed with information, all these silly magazines on celebrities that fill our newsstands. They're almost like an array of candy. It's almost psychedelic. Which what you see in the public art galleries is dead, bland, and flat. And that's the reason why. They don't want us knowing what real, true beauty is because they can't create it. As I said, psychopaths cannot create. They can be devious. And what they do is they will alter reality. So you'll never actually get beauty and sort of a spiritual, psychic, uplifting experience from any situation or any kind of environment or structure created by the psychopaths. But what they can do is they can make the stuff that's truly beautiful, truly spiritually uplifting, and truly insightful, and they can actually wreck it, distort it, and make it seem about as interesting as an empty cardboard box blowing down the street. And then what they present, their version of reality, will be delivered with a Mardi Gras style, colourful presentation that will actually be used to seduce people. And if that isn't an example of gaslighting, I don't know what is.
Exactly. Well, very, very insightful. Well, speaking of your books, obviously, I'm sure many people will be familiar with Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath, and Defeated Demons, Freedom from Consciousness, Parasites in Psychopathic Society, a couple of your previous books. But as you mentioned, the latest book is The Anvil of the Psyche. Tell us a little bit about that book.
I quickly wrote this last year because they started to understand the links between what they call ritual magic and how marketing and public relations works, especially after reading Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. What I was basically reading was a magical text. Now, when I talk about magic, I'm talking about changing the perception of reality in conformity with will, as the likes of Crowley and these others have done. These methods have been brought directly into politics, particularly the Obama. Remember, Obama wanted to create one thing, change. Change means nothing. Like hope, it means nothing. Change means changing things. He never said changing for the better. And that was a classic sleight of hand kind of word magic that's used within ritual occult. And I was starting to see this thing everywhere, from publishing to mass media to politics to everything. Absolutely. Even how medications are being sold. You'll see ads on American TV. I can watch them on YouTube. They don't tell you that the medication is going to make you feel better. What they'll tell you is you'll no longer be feeling what you feel now. So it's change, but it's not change for the better or change towards your desired result. It's in the conformity of the will of the psychopathic control grid. Really amazing stuff. So, I looked at things like Obama's election campaign in 2008, and he precisely followed the 5 stages of ritual magic. And you see, then I'm starting to see it everywhere. And you understand then why people like Crowley, Saul Alinsky, Edward Bernays are held in such high esteem by these people. Not so much because they're evil, but because they actually were bringing out something that was even rooted within European alchemy and even European esoteric traditions that probably came out of the Freemasonic world, that has become what we call public relations, marketing, and just basically mass media. And so I wrote the book Anvil of the Psyche to say, look, if you're an Obama supporter, just read this one section on how everything from chanting, like that ridiculous creepy TV ad that had the kids going, Obama, 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 all the way up to him using terms like hope and change that don't mean anything to get him into power. Because remember, Obama did not promise, really, when you think about it, a wonderful new future. He just said hope and change over again, and then we, the gaslighted victims, imposed a false reality of the future to come based on his magical sleight of hand and his wordplay. And these are the tools they're using against us more and more. Again, my books are toolkits. They help people deal with an assault on our consciousness by a pathological system and how to defend our psyche. And so the Anvil of the Psyche took basically the idea of what you'd get in relationship psychopathology and scaled it up to the control grid and sold it in such a way that people would find it interesting. It's a small book, but it's really just a kind of a high impact read.
Excellent. Well, we will include a link to that book in the show notes for this interview, as well as a link to your website, thomassheridanarts.com, where people can find out more about your work. Of course, not only your writing, but also your visual art, your music. You're a very prolific person in a lot of ways. So I'm sure we could have a conversation simply about advertising and marketing and the manipulation of the psyche, and perhaps we will in the future. But perhaps we'll leave it there for now, talking again about gaslighting and the gaslight effect and this very, very interesting movie. Once again, if you haven't watched it yet, I sincerely hope you will. It's a very interesting movie, just as a movie, let alone as a precautionary tale. So a lot of very interesting issues to explore. I'm so glad that we got the chance to explore them with you. Thomas Sheridan, thank you again for your time today.
Cheers, James. Thanks. All the best.
Thank you for watching the Black Wonder channel. If you found value in our content, please like, subscribe, and share.